Hello and welcome to the 1984 Writing Lab presentation. I apologize that this recording is going to be me solo. We had a lot of technical issues on the east side of town with virtually everything that I needed to record this presentation with. And so Mrs. Paulson, who will soon be Mrs. Burnett on Friday, congratulations to her. She won't be able to join me because there's something else that she needs to do at this time. So I'm afraid at this point it's just me, Mrs. Campbell. You should have received this slides presentation through an inbox message, so make sure that you do check that. Also, one of the things that I was not able to get on that slide is that if you have not yet reached 1.6.1, that is where we're going to pick up. So my recommendation is that you find a Google Doc that you will put on Writing Lab, and this acts as a placekeeper until you're able to go back and actually complete the assignments that lead you up to 1.6.1. So at this point, it might be a good idea to go ahead and get caught up to 1.6.1 so that the rest of this presentation will make sense. And remember that you need to turn in the first draft on time in order for you to not have points deducted. We'll talk more about that towards the end of the presentation, but let's go ahead and get started. So here is the task. You've hopefully by now finished 1984, and what we're going to ask you is this. George Orwell wrote 1984 after the end of World War II because he was worried about the potential for new technologies and new propaganda techniques developed during the war to enable the creation of a totalitarian state, a government that controls every aspect of a citizen's life. The novel can be seen as a cautionary tale, a warning about what could happen if we are not careful. Some recent technologies that would probably have made Orwell even more worried are facial recognition software, artificial intelligence, cell phone tracking and data collection, computer and cell phone hacking, the Internet of Things. These are the computer-controlled devices such as smart speakers, thermostats, refrigerators, and even light bulbs. Your Alexa, Siri, and Google Assist are all part of this Internet of Things. Data encryption with backdoors for the police, surveillance cameras, surveillance drones, and some of them are even armed, privacy on social media, Internet memes and fake news. This is related to propaganda. And deep fake video. This is technology that you can make incriminating video just from a selfie. This is basically photoshopping pictures in order to make it seem real. So what we want you to do, and internet bots, internet bots are also part of this. So here is the core question you need to answer for yourself. Is our technology taking us closer to or farther away from the world of Big Brother? So this is what we've asked you at this point in the 1.6.1 is to just think about whether or not this has happened. For me, you have to realize I graduated actually in 1984. So, of course, during that year, it was a big deal. Everybody read it. That was when the movie came out with John Hurt, the actor, playing Winston. And it was the last film of Richard Burton, who played O'Brien. And then it didn't seem all that bad. But now you've got the technology. At that point in 1984, the technology we were looking at was basically Mac computers and then your IBM computers. And in fact, if you on YouTube search Mac 1984, you will see the commercial that aired during the 1984 Super Bowl that Steve Jobs had put together in order to advertise his new Macintosh computer. So it's kind of interesting to see that. It is a parallel to this, to the movie version of 1984. But now that we've advanced so much in technology, I used to think, well, who in their right mind would sit and monitor all of the data that comes in from all these different technologies? Well, actually, from what I've learned of algorithms and uh, artificial intelligence, they can start coming up with patterns at this point. And so the question becomes, who uses this information? Why do they use this information? Ideally, it's to make our lives easier, but what happens if this technology gets into the wrong hands? What could potentially happen? So, this is the core question that you get to respond to. Your task is to write an argument paper that answers whether you believe that our technology is bringing us closer or further away from an Orwellian society. We are considering this your research paper, but you only need 3 current, meaning no older than 2017, articles from reputable sources. Um, so it's not, we're not talking about a 15-page paper with 11 sources. Just 3 is all that you really need. You can use more if you wish, but it's not expected to be overly researched. You need to compare the technological advances in both the novel and in our society, and then compare the government's motives between Oceania and the US. And finally, compare Orwell's intent with that of what is going on today in our country. We do get some information on why Orwell wrote when he did what he did. And even though what he saw as potentially the communists taking over, that didn't happen. But are we seeing something going on today that is similar? So these are the points that you need to address in your essay. Also determine which of the bullets from the previous slides is most threatening. So you really only need to pick one of those bullets and see how that particular technology is going to interfere or in somehow maybe be a detriment to society rather than a benefit. So examples that define Orwellian in the novel. The term Orwellian, it really refers to that man doesn't have the ability to be himself in a private world, that he's constantly being monitored. His movements are constantly being tracked. I guess you could call this kind of like an Uber elf on the shelf, to make sure that you are following along with what you need to do in society, and so that you are not a danger to society, because initially that's what it should be all about, is that Big Brother is supposed to protect you. But what Orwell has done, he's kind of put a negative slant on this concept of Big Brother. It's also dystopian in nature. If you're a fan of Divergent or The Hunger Games, any of those series where it's a post-apocalyptic society that the government has definitely taken over, and you really have no choice of your own. You must go along with what is deemed necessary by society for you to do. So we want to look at the different technologies that are in the novel, starting with the telescreens. So what was their purpose? Of course, we know the real purpose, from what we understand, is that the people were being constantly monitored to make sure that they were doing what they were supposed to be doing. They also are to provide the information that everybody needs. So the question is, do we have this capability today? And I would think that the answer to that is yes. Um, even the very technology that I'm using right now has the capability of recording me. You could see me if I had allowed the camera, but um, some other things are that if you were in a hangout with me, that I could see you as well. The thing is, I don't have control over your cameras. Only you have that. But in the world of Oceania, every telescreen was monitored. Um, in the exercises, you know that the lady fitness trainer there, she's telling Winston, you need to bend down further. So obviously she's watching every move that he makes. Now, what is Big Brother's purpose in all of this? Well, obviously to make sure that society is protected and that everybody is uh, accomplishing the goals they have for Big Brother and for Oceania. Now, Winston's job, if we look at that, what does he do and why does he do it? So he's working with the Department, basically, of Records, or the Ministry of Records, and the History Department, if you will. And any time that there is somebody in history who needs to be erased, it's Winston's job to do that. What's interesting is that he doesn't seem to be very bothered by it, although he does question in his journal what he's doing, why he's doing it. He's starting to see that there are illogical patterns. And so, is there anybody who has this capability in the world today? Is there anybody else who does this? And if I were to think about it, quite truthfully, I cannot stand TMZ. I'm sorry if you love TMZ, I don't. But it seems like there are those out there who want to put people in a different light and to expose things about them that, none of us are perfect, but for some reason we want to know why these people are not perfect. And there's so many other agencies like TMZ that do this, especially if people are in the spotlight for whatever reason. They're a celebrity of some sort, so they need to be exposed for who they are. This can also lead to slander, libel, but they seem to get away with it a lot more, and reputations can be damaged. So it's I'm even wondering, maybe identity theft. Would you consider identity theft as part of what is happening right now that is similar to what Winston does in 1984? The thing he uses called memory holes, these are rather ironically named memory holes. And it's very symbolic, too. When you think about what does happen when you have a story and somebody needs to become an unperson. And so Winston takes all the changes and then he throws everything down into the memory hole, which is basically an incinerator, so that it is utterly, totally gone. And when I think of memory holes, I think of black holes. And if you know anything about black holes, you know that it is a source that is gravitational, and it sucks things in and it is gone, and it is compacted down into antimatter. So it really is the opposite of what it was before. So what do we have today that might be considered memory holes? Is there anything that can be completely deleted? And when we do put all of our information in one spot in a cloud, a virtual cloud, you don't know what will happen at that point. And so if you're dependent upon something that will save your information, well, what would happen if that were to suddenly break down? For example, I have at my dentist office a couple of years ago, they called me and they said, we've totally lost all of our records. When was your checkup scheduled for? And so I asked them later, I said, didn't you have that guarantee where they're supposed to reimburse you for that? And they said, yep, but they didn't. So it is a question, who are we giving our information to, and what's the potential that that information could eventually go away? The versificator. This was such a wonderful word to say, versificator. And this is how it's described in the book. Here were produced rubbishy newspapers containing almost nothing except sport, crime, and astrology, sensational 5-cent novelettes, films oozing with sex, sentimental songs which are composed entirely by mechanical means on a special kind of kaleidoscope known as a versificator. I found this really interesting because if you look at your phone, and some of you may even be listening to this on your phone, but couldn't you get just about everything that's listed in here on that phone? And apparently there are some machines out there that can compose music. So it's something to think about, that why would we want that? Why would we want something to create a piece of art, basically? For what purpose would that serve? And so if you look at how he has written, the tone that he's written this in, it seems that Orwell knew that mankind can be easily distracted. You know, if you give people instant gratification, then they're less likely to ask questions about how they may be controlled. So it's just something interesting to look at. So ask yourself, is there anything else that seems to mimic something from the book? As you were going through it, what else did you find that you look at today and you know what, that reminds me of this? That's what you want to look for at this point, because this is where you're going to start applying what's happened in the novel to what's happening in the news today. So if we look at the 2 + 2 = 5, what exactly does that mean? What is significant about it? And so we have to look at this as there is an absolute truth. That absolute truth is 2 + 2 = 4. But in order for Big Brother to have total control over its people, it needs to be able to convince them of a truth when the logical explanation is right there in front of them. And it requires a certain amount of brainwashing, yes. And so when you think about it, is there anything that today is similar to 2 + 2 = 5? And we had talked earlier today about Mrs. Paulson had brought up about these brooms that supposedly stand up on their own because of the curvature of the earth. And, you know, when you hear these things and you think, oh, how ridiculous, that's silly. Just like 2 + 2 = 5, that's supposedly silly. And yet, there are people who believe that it is because of the curvature of the earth that these things will stand on their broom ends, when in fact it's just really probably just gravity and the way you smash it down, and eventually they'll fall over anyway. But do we have anything today where the ridiculous, the 2 + 2 = 5, is being seen as truth? And I'm pretty sure that you could scroll through either Twitter or Facebook and find some very strong examples of this. When we're talking about the deep fake news or the deep fake, basically photoshopping, you can make people believe that evil things are happening because you can show them, but you've manufactured what that is. So think about this. Are there instances where you can tell somebody that 2 plus 2 equals 5 and they will believe you? Can you think of any information that you can tell somebody and they will believe you? So that's another thing you want to think about. Okay, so taking a look at these different technologies that we do have today, and actually, when you think about Orwell's book, the fact that he wrote it in 1947 and 48, there's some of these things that he never could have anticipated, but yet the technology seemed to be on its way. Certainly, the surveillance cameras. And the surveillance drones are just taking us where there aren't any cameras now. There are cameras everywhere. Just browse webcams and see how many different ones come up. And it's a constant monitoring of certain places, and it could be used for certain things and certain people. So, what is the overall purpose of any one of these? Let's just take the top one, facial recognition software. So, the idea is, I think it was Apple. Was it Apple that came up with this first, or was it Google? I don't remember, or Samsung. One of them was the first one to come up with, okay, we don't want anybody punching into our phone, but sometimes we forget that 4-digit code or that little symbol that we draw. And so all we really need is to look at our phone, and our phone recognizes our face and it will open up for us. That's really what the facial recognition software is for. Seems simple, right? But could it be used for anything else? We also know that it's coming in for, if something bad happens to somebody, that there is software that can look at the different points of the face and determine if the blurry figure in this surveillance camera's photograph is similar to somebody else who may be a suspect in a crime. So there are potential uses that are good, but how could it be used for bad? It may be, at this point, I'm wondering how easy it would be to fake something. Could you make a mask of somebody that matches the points of the face and then somehow gain access to something that you shouldn't have access to? These kinds of things are where you question. And so if you were to put in facial recognition software plus 1984 in a Google search, you would come up with possibilities of how this could be used negatively. So any one of these, especially if you're particularly interested in it, you can use to look for information of, do we have this now? Then the next question becomes, does the government use any of these? And I believe it probably does, especially if you're looking in places where security is important. So airports or other places where there's potential danger. And so if they're constantly monitoring people as they go by and getting images and then matching those images with photographs of known terrorists, then there's a possibility there that somebody could be caught. But what happens if your face looks like somebody bad? That's part of the problem. We don't know how much the government actually does use. This is part of the problem, in that there's probably a lot of fake news out there saying that it does, and we don't really know what it does do. So that's part of what you're researching here. You're trying to figure out, does the government have the potential to use this, and if so, for what purpose? So the assignment that you're working on now was to actually look for some of these articles. and to bookmark or keep open at least 3 sources that look promising. And what I want you to understand is that because we're talking about fake news and because we're looking at the internet, which is just so filled with inaccurate information, and anybody with a computer can put anything they want on it, we want to make sure we understand how to properly vet your sources. What do you know about them? Can you trust the information they're giving you? So what I've done is I actually took one of um, the bullets, and then I just Googled it with 1984, and these were the first 4 that came up. So I want to go through kind of a demonstration on how you assess whether this is appropriate for a source. I don't know if you're familiar with Wired. I see Wired a lot. And so the best thing to do, so the article's title is, Does the Technology of Orwell's 1984 Really Exist? So I know that from this, I'm probably going to get some suggestions on how Orwell's technology, here's the telescreens, Winston's workstation, the SpeakWrite that he uses, which will translate for him into Newspeak the information that needs to be replaced. So this looks like it could be very good, but I want to know about this source. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the home page. And when they get pop-ups like this, I take it with a grain of salt. They're just so easy with the information. When I'm looking at the homepage, I look at the types of stories that they have and look at what we have here. Balancing brooms. It's not about the planets. So what's interesting here is that it seems to be trying to correct the information that was falsely put out there. And so for people who don't seem to think that, oh, that sounds like a logical idea, they're trying to help you. So it looks like it does want to discuss the truth, especially when it comes to science. So I could possibly, you can't take this photo of the colossal underbelly of an iceberg. So they seem to be focused a lot on science. So this article probably will give me some scientific information. I don't know so much about if the government's planning to use this information for anything, but I can tell that it's possibly a good source. I would want to carefully look through the article and determine the argument and look at the evidence. We've asked you before, especially in first semester ERWC, to look at the ethos, pathos, and logos of anyone's argument. And is it valid? Is it legitimate? So I'm looking at this first for information, and then I will look at it based on the information that it gives. And so it's possibly a good source. So I might set this one aside. I don't know if you've heard of the site Aletheia. I think that's how you pronounce it. But if we go to that article, and we'll see that as soon as it loads, it was having trouble loading today. That may be a clue if it has a low loading spot. Usually good sites have a tendency to have better broadband, etc. But okay, so the article's title is, Will Big Data and Artificial Intelligence Usher in Orwell's Vision of 1984? So I'm expecting from this article, how is AI and big data? I don't know what that is, but I'm hoping the article will tell me. Every click you make may be helping to forge chains in formerly free society, experts warn. Okay, so this is a pretty strong claim. So who are these people making this claim? So again, I'm going to go up to the home page of this group. And I'm starting to see some things that look a little different. The Blessed Virgin Mary and Our Lady of Lourdes, spirituality. These kinds of things I wouldn't normally find on a news site. Page unresponsive. That might be an issue too if the page is unresponsive. See what I can look if it will pop up for me on the home page. I'm not getting a good feeling from this. Not because it's about spirituality. Look at the top here, it says Catholic Spirituality Lifestyle World News. So I have a feeling that there might be a little bias towards religion. I would definitely look at it through that lens. So there's a lot of religious stories behind this. So it's potentially a biased article in a certain direction, but I would look through the article and determine if anything might be useful for my argument. But again, you have to kind of weigh the good and the bad when it comes to who your source is. Futurism.com. It sounds like it could be a legitimate site, although I'm not that familiar with it. And again, we're looking at having this load, taking a long time doing it. I will tell you that this came up earlier, and one of the things I noticed about the story is that it's plastered over the homepage, and that you have to read it or you have to click outside of it to get to the homepage. So here's finally loaded. Godfather of Deep Learning, China's AI Tech is 1984 Big Brother. This is a very provocative, emotionally charged title. Knowing the Godfather. Now, what does the Godfather have to do with China? It seems like they're crossing a couple of paths here that we need to look at. I'm not feeling good about this one because, like I said, it covers the front page. It's using this very volatile language, and I don't know. I'm looking at this. I'm not feeling good about this. I think I'm going to pass this one up. But Forbes, I know about. What I know about Forbes is it's primarily for businesses, especially for the wealthy, self-made entrepreneurs. And it does have a good reputation. So as Orwell's 1984 turned 70, it predicted much of today's surveillance society. So this isn't all that inflammatory like the last heading was. And this one is just looking like it's going to give me expository information of how the surveillance is the same as it was before. Love all the pop-ups, though. Sometimes the pop-ups can tell you some information as well. Why do they have to do this? So this might be something for me to look at, but I'm still not going to look at it with 100% agreement. I'm going to reserve judgment. I'm going to read it through one time, and then I'm going to go back and figure out what information has been supported by this. In 2019, well, let me come up here. In 1984, it was the state that made use of the vast surveillance empire to maintain order. In 2019, a landscape of private companies so large it is almost uncountable monitors, monetizes, and manipulates us. I don't see, though, what they are. So maybe, I don't know. I've just glanced through this. I'll look at it again carefully, but I'm not going to jump right into it just because it's from Forbes. So what you're doing is you're practicing how these how to go through and really evaluate whether or not your article gives you some good solid information. And you are welcome to disagree with it. That's the best part of it. If you find an article, especially one that seems to be overinflated, you can within it maybe make the point that they're wanting us to think it's 1984. So once you get the articles decided on, you're going to take these into account along with those that you shared in 1.6.4. So 1.6.4 is where you needed to write out one of the annotated bibliographies for one of your sources and share that on the discussion board. So once you find one, then you're welcome to go through and look at everybody else's and share that information. In fact, I put one there myself, so you can see that I have posted one. I've also shown you how you're going to respond to the other people on this discussion board. So basically what you're saying is, okay, here's how I can use that information for what I'm thinking, or what's even better is, okay, I can see how this applies to 1984, because if you look on page 271 or whatever it may be, this is what Orwell says. So you're kind of helping each other connect the article to 1984 or dispute it. So you take these and write an expository essay identifying an issue raised by 1984 and discussing whether or not our society is moving closer to that problem or away from it. Support your arguments with information from the text of the novel and what you learned from your internet research and the discussion boards. By the way, go back and look at all the discussion boards. There's been some really good information added there. If your research led you to think that the answer is actually a little of both, carefully explain in what ways we are moving toward Big Brother and in what ways we are moving away. So here's the requirement. First, answer the core question to discuss at least one of the bulleted technologies and its relationship to George Orwell's novel of 1984. Answering that core question. Your claim should describe the degree to which you believe we are moving toward or away from a Big Brother scenario. You must use at least 3 outside articles from reputable sources, and you must correctly use in-text citation with a works cited page in correct MLA format, and it must be in MLA format. Now, this is really easy if you go to Google and you go to Docs and then click on the little plus for a new doc. When you ask Docs to give you a new doc, it'll then bring up the templates. And one of the first templates is Report MLA. That has been formatted for you. And so it's just a matter of replacing the information they have in the template with your essay. So it's easy to get that done. Now, when it comes to the in-text citation and the works cited page, you need to go to the little pink button. It's on where you submit your first draft, but it's also in course resources. And there's a couple of videos there. In fact, I can show you where these are. When you go to Canvas and log into the class. This helps me too because I want to make sure this link is indeed working. In case you haven't noticed it before, there is this course resources link, and it takes you to the actual course resources page. As you scroll down, there's the MLA format, and so when you click on that, you now have, this is how to actually get the lists of works cited. Although if you're using the template, it is formatted for you already because it's hard to do in Google. It's easier to do in Microsoft Word, but for some reason Google, they get a little bit more complicated. I especially expect to see this. Make sure that you watch this video carefully in how you put in-text citation. They work together. You have to have both. So you will see here that the author's last name suggests that. So when I go up into the works cited, then I would just look down for Bestel and find out what the source is there. So make sure that you have both of those. And this is just an addition for how you write an essay, getting the paragraphs together. But you're seniors now. This is second semester. This is part of your test. In fact, we can pretty well say that this semester is your final test before you get into that college and career writing. So, but if you need help with any of this, of course, you're going to email or inbox message your teacher and ask how to do that. Okay, so we've got all of these, and these are the due dates so that you don't want to lose any points on that first draft because it needs to be sent out as a peer review. So the first draft is due Thursday at 11:59 p.m. Then at midnight, the very next minute on Friday, it will be sent out as a peer review. And then the peer reviews, now technically the peer reviews are due Friday at the end of the day. But you know that I give you the weekend in order to do that. So they actually aren't due until Monday at 11:59 p.m. So those of you who work ahead, just be patient. Make sure that the peer reviewer has time to look at it. The other reason why you have 2 days in between is because it does take some time for your teacher to give you feedback on your first draft. And so we want to make sure that you're doing something while you're waiting for us to give you that feedback. So those are the due dates. The revision, we would expect it to come in on Tuesday the 19th, but you have actually the whole semester in order to turn that in, but don't wait too long on that. And remember, you can always resubmit drafts as many times as you need to get the score that you're satisfied with. So if you have any questions, please make sure that you inbox message Mrs. Paulson or me, whoever your teacher is, so that we can get back to you. If you are in Mrs. Paulson's class, make sure that you wish her a very happy wedding on Friday as she becomes Mrs. Burnett, although she has said that she'll keep Paulson until the end of the school year, so you guys don't have to worry about that. So thank you very much for listening and getting through this far with this writing lab. Again, I apologize that it was not more interactive, but it's the age of technology. So have a wonderful Valentine's Day weekend and talk to you soon. Bye.